Elton Lecturers have traditionally served as an example of individual faculty's research in their disciplines and at the same time offering lessons for life. I want to begin with something that's a little different. And Parker, we need to go to the video first. Yes. Years ago, I developed what I refer to as art aerobics. In this, I often have students stand, which is a good way to wake them up in the morning, and pose different works of art. Later, working with Professor Karen Walker and Professor Kim Kearney, I learned about how memory is enhanced with various activities. Not only does writing something down enhance your memory, just as talking about it, hearing about it, but physical activities can improve the brain's ability to retain information. It's called kinetic learning. So in class, we stand and pose different works of art. As silly as this sounds, and it is silly, I see my students smiling, I have often seen students on test repeating poses as they try to remember details of a particular work of art. So, for a demonstration, we have a short video of a few examples presented by my students in my current art history class.
Welcome to Art Aerobics. Prehistoric cave of running bulls. Egyptian pharaoh. Ancient Greek heroes. Ancient Greek contrapposto. Ancient Greek temple. Ancient Greek Nike adjusting versatile. Ancient Greek Doric column. Ionic column. Corinthian column. Ancient Rome, the Pantheon. Gothic architecture, cathedral, flying buttresses. Early Renaissance, Donatello's David. Michelangelo's David. Baroque, Bernini's David. Raphael's School of Athens. Romanticism, Goya. Sleep of reason produces monsters. Vincent van Gogh, Starry Night. Jackson Pollock, Abstract Expressionism. Jasper John, B-flat.
A very special thank you for those students who are willing to help me with this. I began teaching here in 1979, and in those 36 years, having taught many of the same artworks each year, I have come to know the pieces almost as friends. And as true of any good friendship or partnership or marriage, there are lessons to be learned from that relationship. These lessons have been enhanced by many trips to museums to see the works firsthand. This is a museum in Italy. As a matter of fact, this will be my 30th year to take students to Italy. But it's not just the museums, it's the weather, it's the climate, it's the food, and it's the culture itself. For today, I've chosen works that can serve for us as lessons that relate to our core values and the honor code. Of the many great works we study, some unmistakable masterpieces and others are more obscure. I have chosen to start with Michelangelo. While Michelangelo often shares the high Renaissance spotlight with a small number of other artistic giants, he is one of the artists whose works constantly reveals itself to me on a deeper level each time I visit it. I first saw his Pietà, one of the many he worked on throughout his life, a few years after graduating from my undergraduate studies. Located in a side chapel in the Vatican St. Peter's in Rome, I remember my frustration at not being able to get closer to the work because of the large crowd of other tourists. but also because of the bulletproof glass protecting it. But there it was, as I had studied it from slides in freshman art history. The familiarity was reassuring. Since then, I have seen the sculpture every year for 36 years. Like seeing an old friend, I developed a long-term relationship with the work, and I would probably admit with a little pride that I knew the work well and had a deep understanding of it. The work, commissioned by a French cardinal, depicts Mary with the body of her dead son after the crucifixion and before burial. The two are alone, and the only other presence, I thought, is implied, and that is of Adam as symbolized by the base, the rock of Golgotha. The subject, popular in Northern Europe, is revolutionary when told by Michelangelo. None of the traditional angst and pain is found here. Instead, Michelangelo gives us Mary at peace, her rising open left hand gesturing surrender of her earthly son to his heavenly Father. The naturalism and realism created by Michelangelo, who was only 23 at the time, was a milestone in the development of Renaissance art. The marks of the crucifixion are minimal, as the artist has not focused on suffering and death, but the emphasis is on the serene expression of the face of Christ and a youthful Mary at peace. So many beautiful interpretations could be made from this work, and I have probably done so in my annual art history lectures, but my point of view changed when I experienced it through the eyes of a different artist. Photographer Robert Hupka was given access to the work and was able to photograph it from all sides and angles. Over a 2-year period, he produced 5,000 images of the work. That's dedication. These never-before-seen views changed the way the world saw and understood Michelangelo and his creation. Of all the photographic images, it is this one, from above, that touched me the most. As you can see, this is not from a mortal's point of view, you and I standing in front, but that from above. Michelangelo's reason for this is not documented, but knowing his deep faith and devotion, I felt a valid interpretation. That a valid interpretation is that of the Heavenly Father watching over. But in addition to that, it is the circling design created by the torso of Christ, the Virgin's arms, shoulders, and back again to the body of Christ that unifies the two as a whole. A similar lesson is learned from photographs of Michelangelo's David. The most famous Florentine statue stands 17 feet tall, carved, as the Pieta was, from a single block of Carrara marble. Michelangelo was 29 when he finished this. Again, the view known to the world through reproductions and art books was universally the same. Today, it is a rare opportunity for one to see works in their original location. In David's case, the statue is intended to be placed high up somewhere on the facade of Florence's landmark cathedral. But public opinion won, and the statue was placed in a public piazza until later it was moved into a museum. But in all of those locations, very few, and certainly not the public, saw the face as Michelangelo did when he was creating the work. These photographs reveal David's face in a variety of expressions. From below, our view, what do we see? Or as he seeks divine inspiration, or as he ponders the task ahead, or as he appeared to Goliath from above. So what is the lesson to be learned from these two Michelangelo examples? Don't always look at things the same way. Change your perspective. Look at things from a different point of view. Try someone else's point of view. Or refine your understanding of something by refining your point of view. Most often students think refinement's going to a concert or museum. It's not the going to the concert or the museum that is refinement, but the results, the change that takes place in us because of that experience that is at the heart of understanding refinement. We can come away with a deeper understanding of ourselves and our world. So, for our core value of refinement, take a different point of view, and come away with a better, refined understanding of something. Our next example is Peter healing with his shadow by Masaccio. By the 15th century, many aspects of European society were greatly transformed. Life had become more secular. We find modern banking, international laws of trade. The first book was printed, the first public library, urban universities. People had begun looking back in wonder and admiration at the ancient world. In the heart of all of this sat Florence, which would be the center for art, philosophy, and learning for centuries to come. It was the birthplace of what we call today the Renaissance. Located in a small chapel in the Church of Santa Maria del Carmine in Florence, across the river from the civic heart of the Renaissance town, was the small chapel of Santa Maria del Carmine. And although small in size, some historians call this chapel the Sistine Chapel of the early Renaissance because of its artistic innovations and accomplishments. The great artist Michelangelo, as a youth, stood in front of these paintings by Masaccio, and his drawings, his studies of these works still survive. In the chapel, known as the Brancacci Chapel, was named after a patron who hired another artist, 39-year-old Mussolino, to execute the paintings. Mussolino then turned around and hired his young associate, Masaccio. During the work on the chapel, Mussolino left for Hungary. He had been appointed painter to the king. When Mussolino returned, he realized that the younger friend had surpassed him. Before Masaccio could finish the frescoes, he died at the young age of 27. Masaccio's paintings include Expulsion from the Garden, the story of the tribute money, and other stories from the life of Christ. But it is the story of Peter healing with his shadow that is the lesson for us today. Acts 5:14 through 15. And more than ever, believers were added to the Lord, multitudes of men and women, so that they even carried out the sick into the streets and laid them on cots and mats, that as Peter came by, at least his shadow might fall on some of them. Masaccio's interpretation of the story clearly demonstrates what early Renaissance painting was about. It brings biblical characters to life and places them in contemporary Florence. While Peter and his followers are dressed in biblical garments, the four sick men, you can see them on your left, are dressed in modern costumes, and the buildings are contemporary Florence. On the left are the four sick and crippled men waiting to be healed. There is a progression of degrees of illness, starting with the one closest to us, the one on the ground, with his deformed knees and the small wooden support he used for his arms. The next is a beggar on his knees. The third stands and offers prayers. It is as if Masaccio has given us a sequential progress of the healing process as through these four stages. The style of narration is more like poetry than prose. Think, for example, of the four stages of illness in reverse. Also, look at Peter, who is walking straight towards us, as if we are next in the sequence. While there is great drama in the telling of the story, it is Masaccio's interpretation of Peter during this act that is our lesson today. Look at Peter's expression, his countenance, his demeanor. He is walking with the dignity of one challenged to perform a noble task. Yet he appears almost to be completely detached from the miracle that is taking place next to him. He does not look at the sick. He does not acknowledge the fact that he is part of the healing. He does nothing to bring attention to himself. It is not about him. He is not performing the miracle, but is only the vehicle, the tool for the miracle to happen. And as such, he does not seek or expect recognition or reward. Service is one of SVU's core values, and if we are to learn from Masaccio's painting, we can understand how to do service that is not self-serving. Our next example is a small painting by Fra Filippo Lippi. Having lost both parents at a young age, he was sent to an orphanage in Florence that was operated by an order of nuns. It happens that it was the same building complex that included the chapel with the Masaccios we just saw. In Fra Lippi's work, the Madonna and Child with two angels shows us a different Mary. She is seated in contemporary Florentine dress in an elegant chair with a view of the local countryside out a window. For me, the lesson here is more than what the work tells me about historical developments of painting in Florence. I find the lesson not with Lippi's rendering of the Virgin and Child, but, as my students know, with the angel in front. Look at his expression as he holds the Son of God, the smile, the delight in his eyes, the enthusiasm. For me, I find it a record of the joyful bliss of his experience and the fact that he wants to share it with us. He turns to us, inviting us to join him. Can you imagine what it would feel like to be the one who is handed the Christ child? This is an invitation to share with that joy. I'm reminded of President Wilcox's comments at the Christmas Forum last September. Remember, he said, Christ is your friend. I feel that we need to experience this friendship and all others with enthusiasm, another of our core values. Discipleship. Throughout history, few artists have caused as radical a change in pictorial perceptions as Caravaggio, who was renowned for painting in a direct, realistic manner, no idealization. Instead, he thought to represent truth in his art. Caravaggio's painting, The Taking of Christ, was painted around 1602 when he was at the height of his fame. It is a remarkable treatment of a familiar story we all know of the betrayal of Judas. When one of the apostles, when he agrees to lead the soldiers of the high priest to arrest Judas. Breaking with the past, Caravaggio creates a new visual narrative. Zooming in on the figures, avoiding any clues that would provide a description of the location. The emphasis is directed on the action of Judas and the temple guards as they overwhelm Jesus, who offers no resistance to his destiny. The disciple on the left is John the Baptist, who, as he flees into the darkness, his red cloak flies from his shoulder, billowing open, binding the faces of Christ and Judas together. There are only two sources of light illuminating the scene, the unseen moon and the man on the far right holding a lantern. One light source is natural, the other man-made. Tradition is that it is Caravaggio holding the light, portraying himself, at the age of 31, as a passive spectator to a divine tragedy. And as the artist, it is his role to shed light on the truth. I had good fortune to see the work just after its lengthy and extensive restoration, and I stood in front of it for a long time. It was not Caravaggio's dramatic painting technique or use of color, but the position of the hands of Christ. And so I ask for you all to join me, and where you're seating, put your hands in the same position that Christ has. Keep them there. I took a postcard reproduction of the work home and put it up in my studio. For weeks, I researched the work and thought about this position. I could not figure it out. One day, using my own theory of art aerobics, I positioned my hands in the same position. They have to do it too. Good. I positioned my hands in the same position. Then I ran the story backwards. Before Judas arrived, raise your hands, and what was Christ doing? I surmise that a moment before, the hands were raised in prayer, as Scripture tells us. What Caravaggio has given us is the symbol that Christ, at this very dramatic moment, in spite of all that is happening and is going on, has not broken his communication with God. The word disciple in Greek means a pupil or an apprentice, and in English, a learner, a student. So a disciple learns from a teacher. And we can learn from Christ's example that no matter what the situation, we never break our connection with God. Scholarship. Early in the 17th century, Caravaggio was commissioned to create a painting of St. Matthew for the altar of a church in Rome and was to depict the saint writing his gospel. The instructions were clear, and Caravaggio probably knew what was expected: a conventional depiction of the saint and a glorious angel, and it would match the other paintings already in the chapel. But Caravaggio broke with the rules. He broke with tradition and produced an image of the saint, the one you see on the screen, as an unlearned peasant with a bald head. He's shoeless and with dirty feet, obviously in a state of concern, with intense concentration as he grips the huge book with wrinkled brow and follows the angel's instructions. This pose reminds me a lot of my students taking a test, except they have their shoes on. Caravaggio gives us a St. Matthew that appears not only not to know how to write, and the angel, with graceful nonchalance, guides the saint's hands. When the painting was presented to the church officials were scandalized, rejected the painting, and told Caravaggio to do it over. And he did. This first one that you're seeing in black and white was destroyed during the war, during World War II, during a bombing. For the second painting, Caravaggio worked within conventional tradition. He stayed within the bounds of what was acceptable. The second piece, true to the same story, includes major changes. Matthew looks more like the other two in the chapel. The saint is again serious but composed in the presence of the angel. Instead of being fully controlled, as in the first painting, St. Matthew continues the text through inspiration. He's working more on his own accord as the heavenly messenger dictates to the saint, even to the point of keeping track as he counts off the details on every hand. Yet if we look closely, we can see that the saint, when inspiration came, did not even have time to completely sit down. He's standing with one knee on a bench that's almost tripping over. His writing is inspired, and he rushes to complete it, and thus providing his role for divine intervention. If this work can serve as a lesson for the core value of scholarship, let us remember that sometimes it is good to break from tradition and convention, that something daring and different is called for. And yet, there are those times that our scholarship should follow convention and tradition. Also, we should be inspired in our work, whether it is something new and difficult, as with the first image of the saint, or if it is something that comes easy to us, as depicted by the second version. But in both cases, the last painting tells us not to procrastinate, but to get to work. Before I discuss our last value, accountability, I want to sidetrack a little bit with another example. Historians often claim that the temples on the hill above Athens, Greece, are some of the most beautiful in the world. The star of this group of buildings, the Pantheon, dedicated to the goddess Athena, has been called the most perfect example ever, or as having unsurpassed excellence, to be surveyed, studied, and emulated by architects of later ages. Part of this beauty is achieved through precise and exacting rules of rules and proportion and measure that the Greeks excelled in. Everything was regulated by rules. How wide the columns could be, how tall the columns could be, how many columns, the number and placement of the columns, rules even determining the angle of the roof, the length of the roof. All aspects of the building were governed by rules. Yet, what is astounding, that in spite of what appears to be limiting rules, there is an incredible artistic expression. And this is the lesson that parallels our code of honor. In spite of what appears to be limiting, precise rules, there is the possibility of the creation of an unsurpassed, beautiful life. Do I need to repeat that? In spite of what may appear to be rules, excessive rules, limiting rules, the most beautiful creation you can happen. Yet, and I must add yet, there's hardly a straight line in the building. The front step, the style of 8, curves upward about 3 inches. The corners, 4 inches incline on the longer sides. A slightly greater adjustment has been made to the top. The columns at the end of the building are not vertical, but are leaning towards the center. And those at the corner out of plumb by 2.5 inches. The outer columns are wider than the others and are spaced more closely together. Historians call these optical refinements. And while it is not universally agreed what the intent was, we can still find our lesson here. The ancient Greek architects took a philosophical approach to the rules and proportions. Their attempt was to replicate here on earth a divine-inspired set of rules. But the problem was not in the rules, but with human eyesight. While the determining factor in mathematics of any notable work was the ultimate outcome, the human eye didn't quite get it right. There was nothing wrong with the math. The math was perfect. The problem was with the humans, and hence optical refinements. The analogy is that while we are not perfect, we can strive to live the best and most beautiful life within the code of honor. Our last core value is accountability. We'll finish the core values. And for this, I'd like to use a contemporary example and one that I had personal experience with. A number of years ago, I was asked by my friend, artist Cy Twombly, to help him in his Lexington studio with mixing colors. He thought I was good at this, and I had assisted him with other projects in his Lexington studio. This time, it was for a very special project. The Louvre Museum in Paris had asked him to create a design for the ceiling of the Salle des Bronzes, and this is a view of the room. This vast room, over 100 feet wide, 350 feet long, is that the size of a football field, housed the museum's collection of Greek and Roman bronzes. Cy is the only American artist that has been asked to produce work for the museum. He asked me to mix the colors and to paint the mock-up, the model. The design was not a painting like his contemporary abstracts of energized strokes embedded with written prose that referenced the classical world. Instead, it evoked the church ceilings from the Middle Ages that represented the heavens with blue skies and gold stars. Instead of stars, Cy included large circles that at once represented planets, often named after classical characters: Pluto, Venus, Mercury. Then again, on another hand, the circles, you'll see in a minute, could be the circular shield of the Greek heroes. Cy's design included strips for the name of the Greek sculptors that created the most famous works of art from the ancient world. These names, Polykleitos, Lysippos, Praxiteles, and others, were lettered by my husband, Mario, that's him on the right, who was professor of classics at Washington and Lee University. At no time while I was doing this preliminary work did I know that Cy had plans to send me to Paris to participate in the creation of what would be a huge painting. So what seemed like a small project for me, for which one I was only accountable for mixing colors and getting it right, later became one on which I was accountable at on a very large scale. So I finished the design and I'm sent to Paris to work with 2 painters from the Louvre. Our core value of accountability went with me. I was accountable for my personal and professional actions, and as Cy's representative, as an SVU faculty, as an artist on my own right, and as Barbara Crawford, an American working in another country. As I quickly and briefly walk you through the process, one can see the different levels, ways, and multiple times I was held accountable for my artistic work and decisions. Here I arrived prepared, bringing with me preliminary sketches and notes. Be accountable for what you went for before you do a big job. Pay attention to small things. I kept notes all along the way. Stay true to the plan. There's the maquette on the left and my recreating the colors on the right. Revise, revise, and revise. Review it. Keep looking at it. Understand the context of your work. We kept taking the colors back to the room in the Louvre to check it out. Consult with other experts. And when you have things right, like your first draft of a paper, get to work. And work it was. That's one of the circles. Consult with your colleagues. Stay in shape. You never know what you'll need to do. Keep at it. It adds up. This is the room from above. Small things add up to a larger project. Look at it from a different view. We had to climb the ladder constantly to see it from the same angle and distance that viewers would. Use good tools. Have good tools. And if you don't have the tools you need, make them. Can you see the brooms we put together? We needed a large brush, so we made one. Take lunch breaks, snack breaks, eat well. Work at night if you have to. It keeps adding up. Clean up your mess if you make one. Share the success with your friends. Keep track of it along the way. Rely on experts. This is a view of the room, and those plywood cases you see at the bottom are covering the display cases full of the Greek and Roman ruins. At the very top, can you see the mechanical scaffolding-like structure? There are the workers on top of it. They had to invent a machine that would unroll the canvas and apply it to the ceiling without interfering with the room below. So that's something that the experts did. Rely on experts to do their part. And at the end, celebrate. In summary, I'd like to propose that of all our core values, refinement is the key to the rest. You're thinking, how many concerts and museums or lectures do I have to go to? But if we accept that the idea of refinement means to make something better, let us then find ways to make all of the core values better. Refine your accountability. Refine your scholarship. Refine your enthusiasm. Think of your actions at a sporting event. Can you make them better? Refine your discipleship. And when you need a break, go do some art aerobics. Thank you.